Offer testing, if you haven't done it yet, whoopsie, that's really scary for you. Labor Day is coming up. You've got a couple months to sort of start doing that. And I recommend intentionally testing different types of offers. You don't want to be going into Black Friday weekend with like a net new offer type. You have no idea how it's going to play. Think first about how do people buy my product? The structure of your promo is really important. And types of creative that work for those different types of offers will be vastly different. Just make sure you look at your Q4 data from last year around creative. Looking at like actual engagement costs, you might find this ad was really cheap to run, but maybe it never really got its legs in terms of like scaled spend. So going back and finding those like almost hidden opportunities and digging them back up and trying them this year early, hugely helpful.
It's all killer, no filler. This is Eric, and I'm here with the Pilothouse Socials team to talk about Q4 preparedness. We've prepared the ultimate Q4 guide. We did a webinar on it last week, which was really awesome, but we thought we'd just recap it here for our podcast audience. Q4 is something that we're across different departments we're thinking about a lot already. So, Aves, why don't you take us away and jump into how we are preparing for Q4 this year?
Yeah, totally. So we're already thinking about it, and we're already actively engaging with clients and talking about it and kind of getting all of our ducks in a row on top of the pond that we are going to be stocking. I keep saying that like when you approach Q4 with no plan, it's a really anxious time of year if you're in the e-commerce space. But if you approach it with a plan, it's full of anticipation and fun times and checking Shopify and watching those numbers go up. So we're just kind of at this point in the game at Pilothouse, really starting to think about like what do we need to do from both a content and a traffic and spend planning perspective. So thinking a lot about stocking the pond, which Taylor and I have maybe collectively said 9,000 times in the past week. I can maybe toss it over to Taylor to speak to how we're stocking the pond and what we're doing to kind of ensure that we've got the most and the best traffic heading into Q4.
There's going to be a lot of fishing metaphors going forward. I'm excited to preview, but we'll start with stocking the pond. What does that mean exactly in the simplest terms, Taylor?
Yeah, so when most people think about stocking the pond, I think it's pretty self-explanatory in that you think of increasing your audience pools so that you have more of an audience to draw from when you approach those major seasonal moments. We like to think about it as well as far as how are you stocking the pond from a lever and opportunity perspective in addition to your audience pools? Like what are you doing to prepare to create anticipation or excitement and get people really pumped about what your brand is going to be doing and offering them come Q4?
And this year is also kind of an extra unique one with the election cycle coming at the start of Q4. There's going to be even like differences of CPM versus previous Q4. So really stocking the pond now is probably more important than previous years as well.
All right. So what's our strategy for stocking the pond? I think one of the things, and how do you budget for stocking the pond? Like, how do you think about stocking the pond budget versus, month of, or, Q4, actual Q4 budget?
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest questions that I think like any media planner, media buyer, or head of brand or any role really on a marketing team is trying to figure out. What we've found is looking through different resources that are available, like your touch points and user journey reports in GA4 to understand how many days or how many touch points it takes to convert someone, which you can filter on by channel is an interesting place to start. In addition to running your own, like when we're getting technical, running your own kind of lift analysis to take a look at historic data around how does that 1-day click versus 28-day click translate over different time periods, or like 1 to 7 to 28, right? So there are different ways of looking at it and trying to basically create questions for yourself that you can do to define parameters that you might set to say, hey, based on X% lift we see in this window, or this is the touch point amount, we feel comfortable assigning this much budget to that outside of our regular business as usual type stuff. So that's kind of the technical side. But yeah, I mean, it really comes down to understanding, roughly like the other side, I think to speak to actually is the audience pool size too, like looking at how big your audience pools are, and in historic years or recent moments, even understanding what your cost of delivery and how much reach you're getting within those pools to know, do we have enough? When should we start thinking about getting more? And how long do we have to get more based on prospecting metrics for that. But that's the really, really technical side. I'll let Jacob and Avery chime in on the not so technical side of it.
I can jump in from a content point of view, which is usually a little bit more fun and zesty. So stocking the pond from a content point of view is like thinking about the type of content that will work throughout Q4 that's not specific to a sale, and starting to get that into the account now. So you can start doing some very subtle like gifting, unboxing, that type of stuff. Obviously, don't put it in Santa wrapping paper, but even just like, I got this as a gift and I love it, that can work from now until the big show in November really easily. That's just like an evergreen angle. And then also starting to think about your content needs. So most people, unless you've got a really weird business, you will spend more during Q4. So you will need more creative. So do you need to start thinking about sourcing more creator content, getting kind of that ball rolling? Do you need net new like photography? That's another big question that I think people often don't think about until like late September, early October. And it's like, oh shoot, we've got these products coming out throughout Q4 and no photography for them. So starting to think about that and stocking the pond from a creative point of view, so that when it comes time to start putting more content into the ad account, you've got a nice diverse sort of baseline of content that you can edit in different ways and launch with sort of different angles and stories.
It like really comes down to product too, like tailing off of that. If your product's some complex, new technology that people aren't aware of, or it's maybe a few $100s, you do have that longer buying cycle, like it's 100% going to be worth it now to start spending into those people, even if that performance isn't there, right? Like when Black Friday comes, you want them to be ready. You don't want to just start hitting them with your ads at the top of funnel. So just at a very general sense, like really thinking about your product buying cycle, and pretty much every product at this point should be starting to stock that pond, but some brands it's going to be more effective right now than others as well.
I love that idea of in an evergreen way, seeding the idea that your product is perfect for gifting, so that whenever that gifting period comes around, it's a thought and one of the angles that goes into why someone would want your product. How much retroactive data are we looking at right now based on last year's Q4 when it comes to determining how aggressive we're going to be this year?
A lot. Yeah, that's usually like a great place to start, especially if you have multiple years, because really it comes down to increasing your confidence in the data that you have. And a big part of that too is understanding like which audience pools, whether you're doing the lift analysis between different attribution windows, or you're looking at just the comparative data in one, or like a time series based review of it. It's really, really useful to almost create a waterfall system of confidence for yourself. Like maybe it's this deeply engaged lookalike audience in prospecting that I feel the most confident in based on Q4 last year. In that case, where does that fit into the spend allocation? How am I looking at my prospecting versus retargeting split as I near it, knowing that I want the pond stocked? All those kinds of questions. But yeah, we find laying out a framework to go through that exercise and be able to review and answer any questions you have for yourself is really powerful in advance.
Aves, on the creative side, I know you have a note here about really going over what creatives have worked in the past, what offers have worked best in the past. Can you go a little bit more deep on how you think about it from a creative side?
Yeah, totally. Offer testing, I would say, is like a whole different beast and something that I am very passionate about. So we can maybe touch on that first. Different offers are going to function differently for different types of products, right? So if you've got something that's like a low AOV consumable and people tend to buy multiple pieces of it at one time, maybe a tiered offer is your best bet, because that's going to boost AOV and stop people kind of buying these maybe $25 items at 20% off. But if you've got a higher AOV product, that single percentage off is really simple and a really big discount, and will probably be better suited for what you're trying to sell. So offer testing, if you haven't done it yet, whoopsie, that's really scary for you. And Labor Day is coming up. You've got a couple months to sort of start doing that and giving it a try. And I recommend like really intentionally testing these different types of offers leading up to Black Friday. You don't want to be going into Black Friday weekend with like a net new offer type, just because you have no idea how it's going to play. So definitely thinking first about how do people buy my product? Do they buy one and it's low AOV, so I want to get that AOV up, I want to be maximizing my rev throughout Q4? Or is it like a $300 set of weights and people are going to buy one, period? They're not gifting that most likely and buying multiple pieces. So thinking about like the structure of your promo is really important. And yeah, either looking back at that testing you've already done or figuring out how you're going to do that before Q4 and before Black Friday weekend this year, really critical. And I would say when we're thinking about just like looking at historical data when it comes to creative, I like to kind of bucket it into looking at that previous sale creative. So what worked, what didn't work. One big call out too is like even mixing that tiered offer and that percentage, like those examples. Types of creative that work for those different types of offers will be vastly different on platform. So like a percentage off is really easy to just throw that on to a winning static image that you have and go nuts with it. Same with like creator generated content. Really easy to have someone like hold your product and say like, you can get this for 15% off. But if you're looking at a tiered offer, that takes a lot more muscle on the front end, on the pre-click side, to kind of explain to people what it is. So thinking about like how much text is good to include in my ads, what are the colors? I've definitely taken brands and given them like assigned promo colors. And then we're basically training an audience to be like, when you see this logo and you see this color combination, it's a sale. So thinking about things like that, really exciting when you're kind of analyzing your sale data. And then also just look at your top evergreen ads from the past year and figure out like trend wise, what style has been working. So is it statics? Is it CGC, polished video? And then figure out what are the angles that are working and just think of ways that you can kind of tie those into either gifting or sale. You might not always be able to do it, but sometimes like a value proposition is the best one. Like you're getting this at a lower price. So that's an easy thing to wrap into sale content. And then finally, pretty obvious, just make sure you look at your Q4 data from last year around creative if you have it, and try to think of it too. Like I see a lot of people sort of make the mistake of like, I'm just looking for what did we spend the most on and what generated the most money, because Q4 is a scramble and that's how we're optimizing. But make sure when you're doing those look backs, you're looking at like actual engagement costs too, because you might find this ad was really cheap to run, but maybe it never really got its legs in terms of like scaled spend. So going back and finding those like almost hidden opportunities and digging them back up and trying them this year early, hugely helpful.
Very cool. So what's this note about lightening the load for November?
Yeah, that's just sort of like the conversation around start building your creative early and stocking the pond with like Black Friday creative that you can just launch. I always tell people too, it's like you want to clear up bandwidth and capacity to do the urgent things over that period of time. So you're going to start to see ads win and you're going to want to iterate on them to say like last chance. So stocking the pond can also mean like just building your creative early and having it ready to go, which kind of leads into our next combo, which is locking in your marketing calendar and your promo calendar so that you can start doing that actual like tactical both spend and content planning. Having that like solid calendar is really important.
Yeah, and you'll want to like even check some of the little things like your account spending limit, like making sure that you're not going to hit that in the middle of Black Friday. There's a lot of like little things to kind of check off. So if you're getting ahead of it now, there's less chance that you're going to run into chaos during the sale.
100%. Now, when it comes to creating a marketing calendar, I think in the webinar, did we provide a template? We might be able to link it in the notes here. But what goes into creating a killer marketing calendar?
When I think of a marketing calendar, I think of a mix, like really just everybody basically working in total alignment, no matter what part of the business you're working in, really. Whether it's understanding when your like e-commerce team is getting ready to drop products, or you're looking at when your marketing team is looking at launching some sort of brand moment, then everybody is aware of the seasonal moments. We like to kind of categorize them into basically everything you should be thinking of that could be relevant to either use in ads, but also impact your revenue or traffic in some way, shape, or form. So when it comes to creating a marketing calendar, ultimately, a lot of the time it's as easy as like you want a simple spreadsheet where you list the days you know what day of the week it is. You add any notes about like things you're doing, what's happening in those external moments, so you're aware of them, whether they're positive, likely to drive a lot of support growth or create a lot of demand, or they're potential challenges, like your costs might spike at this time or various things like this, right? And then when you lay it out, that's ultimately where a lot of I think it takes a lot of pressure off the whole need to, how much should I stock the pond? What should I spend on this or that? Like, because when you have these levels of confidence and you can know, okay, I've got this run of this happening here, I feel pretty good about like this time out from that, I should stock the pond, or I can leverage these peak days to help offset the valley days the business might have. So it's just incredibly helpful for building that kind of system. But yeah, ultimately like a sheet with your brand moments, your seasonal moments, your anticipated mountains and valleys, that's helpful as a starting place to work from.
I'm picturing Jean-Luc Picard just sitting in his captain's chair and he's sort of just deploying the assets as they need to go. He's not like, Captain Kirk, where he's just getting rocked, and that will happen though. You will get rocked by Klingons, I think, during Q4. So you got to prepare for that too.
Yeah, I feel like a really good point Taylor made there too was like, when you do the work to put this calendar together, recognizing where the peaks and valleys are, and then figuring out what you're going to do in those valleys is really important. So like something that I love to see is like plotting out as well, like what emails are being sent out when, and is there a way that we can like juice out extra rev by plotting an email in now that we know there's going to be this valley. Same with like a limited edition launch or like a really exciting brand moment. So like starting off almost by establishing like when are our peak periods versus when are kind of the scarier periods during Q4, and then going from there with the marketing calendar, just saying like we can kind of combat this like slowdown that we've historically seen with either like a juicy email exclusive offer or a limited edition product launch. So really like accounting for the calendar that already like kind of exists based on data, and then just like clawing your way to the most revenue. Definitely what I love to do.
And this is cross-departmental as well, right? If there is going to be a big email campaign launched, like, because I guess if you're bringing all these new customers in on Meta, you want to know that they're going to be brought into a great retention program so that they're again ready to buy, in a couple months when it comes to Q4.
100%, and like a huge, like as someone who actively buys paid social like ads for leading brands, it is such a game changer to know when an email is going out, when an SMS is going out, how many we have, what the roadmap throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the quarter looks like, just so that like I can say, hey, I've got this campaign or this pocket on Meta that's doing really well and I feel like I can scale it. That adds that confidence to be like, okay, great, we're anticipating more short-term revenue, so I can test the waters a bit and scaling that a little bit more aggressively maybe, or flexing spend to stock the pond and also take advantage of the moment. So yeah, it just creates a really cohesive system where our team feels super dialed.
Very cool. I think, I think this is going to be a 2-part episode. I think we should do a 2-part meta preparedness episode because I do have to bounce to another podcast, but I think this is good. We've sort of covered the setting of the stage, right? You're stocking the pond, you're getting your assets all together, you're building your calendar. And I think next podcast, we can kind of go deep on some of the blunders, some of the things that you really don't want to do in the run up to Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So we'll see you on the next one, guys. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're not getting the D2C newsletter, you can subscribe for free at directtoconsumer.co. And if you want to learn more about Pilothouse's all-killer, no-filler services, take off to pilothouse.co. I'm Eric Dick, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.